Sports Talk Chicago. Here with Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's a Bulls insider at Stadium and the host of the Sharpshooters podcast. Please welcome Mark Schanowski to the program. Mark, it's great to have you on. How are you?
I'm doing really good, John, and obviously it's been a busy week in the NBA, and now we're starting to push for the playoffs, so it's going to be interesting to see which of these teams can benefit the most from the moves they made.
So, Mark, are the Bulls in win-now mode?
No, not really. I think that Arturas is still looking at this as a long-term project. He made some very bold moves on the trade deadline date. I didn't think he'd surrender 2 first-round draft picks for anybody, especially a 30-year-old center who really has not had a huge impact on winning and losing in Orlando. But he decided to make that move, and I think it's the first of many moves we'll see over the next couple of years to try to build a roster that kind of plays the style that he and Billy Donovan want to implement. The first game was awful against San Antonio, but that's to be expected with no practice time and these guys trying to figure out what their teammates want to do. I think they'll play a lot better in the coming weeks, but I don't think it's a win-now move. I think Vucevic is under contract for 2 more years. I think that he'll be an important contributor to what they're trying to do, but I think you'll see a lot more changes coming up this summer to try to get that roster a little bit more in tune with what he and Billy want to do.
Did the Bulls give up too much for Vucevic?
I think so. Anytime you give up 2 first-round draft picks, those things are gold in professional sports these days, particularly obviously in the NBA and in the NFL. The Bulls, I think, even with these additions, are unlikely to make the playoffs, which means you're giving up a top 14 pick in what's considered one of the deepest drafts in a lot of years. And they're still looking to find that facilitating point guard that can kind of unlock some of the offensive things that Billy wants to do. And there's a chance they could squeak into the playoffs this year, particularly because the East is so bad beyond the top 3 teams. But I don't know that necessarily gets you anywhere. If you finish, let's say you qualify for the play-in, you somehow get in, and you have to play Brooklyn in the first round. Well, that's most likely a 4-game sweep, and then you're out. And obviously, without having a first-round draft pick, that's their goal. They don't care because they don't have a draft pick to try to protect. But I just think that, they didn't give up much in terms of players in the 2 deals that they made, but those draft picks, they may regret that down the line.
Mark Schanowski here on Sports Talk Chicago. Mark, how do you feel about the Wendell Carter trade?
Didn't bother me at all. I think that he has really struggled in his 3 years as a pro. He's missed so much time because of injuries that I think has hurt his development. But you could see that in the time that he was in Chicago, he's one of those athletes that really is hard on himself, that kind of beats himself up when he doesn't play well. And I think when you're playing professional sports, you have to be more tough-minded than that. I think that too often he almost got into his own head and kind of held back his own development. Now, he was playing center, a little bit undersized at 6'9", but a lot of guys in professional sports play out of position because that's what their team needs. I thought there were a lot of excuses at the ready when he didn't play as well as people expected for a guy who was taken number 7 overall in the 2018 draft. And now he walks into a situation in Orlando. I noticed in his first game, he didn't even start, and their roster is a mess right now. He's also going to be competing for minutes with Mo Bamba, who was the guy taken directly in front of him in that 2018 draft. So it's up to Wendell maybe to take a look in the mirror and think that, I have to stop making excuses for why things aren't working out for me, and I have to show the potential that I displayed at Duke that made me such a high pick in the draft.
Is he a draft bust right now?
No, I don't think you could say that. It's only his 3rd year in the league. He's 22 years old. He's got plenty of time to prove that he's worthy of that high draft status. He's a good defensive player. He can move his feet. I think those are skills that will serve him well in terms of being a modern day center. He just needs to accept that role, and he has to keep working to expand his shooting range and be more aggressive on the offensive end. Obviously, Orlando is in a total rebuild right now. Not only did they trade Nikola Vucevic, but they also traded their other 2 best players, in Aaron Gordon and Evan Fournier. So it's a total rebuild in Orlando. He's going to get his chances, and hopefully he does well because he's a very bright young man. He's very thoughtful in a lot of the interviews that he's done during his time in Chicago, and I wish him a ton of success. It just didn't work out here in Chicago, and for a lot of athletes, sometimes that second stop is what kind of unlocks their ability.
What about the bench turnover for the Bulls? Were you shocked by that at all?
No, I mean they were disappointed with some of the guys that they were bringing off the bench. The backup center position, I think that both AK and Billy viewed that as a vast wasteland between Daniel Gafford, Luke Cornett, and Cristiano Felicio. I think they felt like they had nothing they could do there. I mean, there were games, since Thad Young moved into the starting lineup. There were games where only Carter was the only center who got off the bench during the course of the action. So, they wanted to improve that. Daniel Tice is a major upgrade. He was starting for a playoff team in Boston. He's also undersized at 6'8", but he is tough as nails. Where we mentioned Carter sometimes questioned his confidence, you'll never see that with Tice. Even though he's given up inches and pounds to a lot of the NBA centers, he's never going to concede any bit of ground. He's going to be tough in the paint. He's going to really help their second unit, and he's going to be different from what Vucevic gives you as an offensive center to start the game. When you bring in Tice, he's going to play tough and dirty in the paint, and he's going to make sure that people know he's out there. So I think that was a great addition. This is a Bulls team that, because of its youth, really suffered in the toughness category at times. But now with the moves that they made, the average age is starting to climb up, and I think with some of the guys they added, we'll see a tougher, more competitive team night in and night out. Whether or not they're good enough to make the playoffs this year and be a factor down the road, there's still more moves to come. So it was a good start, but as I mentioned, AK still has some work to do.
Let me ask you this, Mark. Did Karnisovas send a message in dealing 3 different Garpax picks?
Oh, I don't think there's any question. When he came in, he played his cards very close to the vest. In his initial press conference, he said he's very methodical in his approach. He's patient and deliberate, and he's not going to rush into anything to, try to blow up the roster. But, hey, after 40-some games in the first season as head of basketball operations, he looked at the roster and said, I don't like much of it, and I'm going to turn this thing over very quickly. I think that he's seen that, it's a roster that had a lot of holes in it, and he did some things to strengthen them in terms of inside toughness, some ability to score in the paint, as well as their guards with Levine and Kobe White. And I think that he kind of sent a message that this wasn't working. I stuck with it for 40 games. Now I'm going to start implement the plan to try to remold this team in my vision.
Mark Schanowski here on Sports Talk Chicago. Mark, should Lauri Markkanen still be a Bull?
Well, I think they tried. I think they tried very hard to make a move for Lonzo Ball, but the Pelicans wanted more than just Lauri. I think they were probably asking for this year's first-round draft pick, and the Bulls decided that they were better off to try to make the move for Vucevic and maybe get into the free agent game this summer. Now, they would have to make a series of moves in terms of renouncing player rights to try to get close to that $20 million a year figure that Lonzo Ball is going to want, but they can do it. It is possible. They could also explore the sign and trade market, and it doesn't just have to be Lonzo Ball. There are other free agent guards out there that they could try to pursue. I'm not sure exactly who they have their eyes on right now, but it's very clear that they're intrigued by Lonzo Ball, and there's been a lot of publicity about the fact that Lonzo wants out of New Orleans. So even though they didn't get him at the deadline, I'm sure that will be one of their targets, either in restricted free agency or in a trade this summer.
What makes Lonzo Ball such an intriguing candidate for the Bulls?
I think just the fact that he's an old-school point guard. He has good positional size at about 6'5", and he's a good defensive player. His strength is exactly what the Bulls need. He wants to facilitate the offense. He wants to get the ball to the scores. He wants to push the pace when you get a defensive rebound, make sure you get some easy baskets in transition. He's an exceptional passer, which is something the Bulls are lacking right now. And I think that when Billy Donovan looks around, that's the kind of guy he would like running his offense. They're going to get competition from a lot of teams in the summer once he hits free agency. The Knicks have a ton of cap space. I know that they're overloaded with point guards on their roster, but none of them have really fulfilled their potential as NBA players. Tom Thibodeau, of course, is the coach of the Knicks, so it'd be kind of interesting if it's Tom Thibodeau and the Knicks going up against Billy Donovan and the Bulls trying to recruit Lonzo Ball this summer.
What else do the Bulls need in free agency, or what needs could they address, do you think, this summer?
Well, as I mentioned, they're very limited in cap space, so they're gonna have one swing to make, and if that is a point guard, which everyone assumes it's going to be, I think that Lonzo Ball's at the top of their list because of some of the moves they made, they also have some question marks at the small forward position. But when you look around the NBA, so many teams are going with 3-guard fronts and 2 bigs. They could conceivably, if they got Lonzo Ball, go with the starting lineup with Lonzo Ball, Zach LaVine, and Kobe White as your 3 perimeter guys. And then you'd have Vucevic and Thad Young as your bigs. Or, excuse me, you'd have Thad Young and Patrick Williams starting with Thad Young coming off the bench. So they've got some options in what they can do in constructing the roster. I don't think necessarily that any NBA team, when they go to the whiteboard, looks at center, power forward, small forward anymore. It really has become a game where they look at 2 bigs and 3 perimeter guys, and how you construct that is just based on defensive matchups. You know, with Lonzo Ball and Zach LaVine and even Kobe White close to that 6'5" range, you could conceivably get by with one of them defending the other team's bigger wing. I don't think that would be an issue right now. So I don't think you have to think in terms necessarily that, well, the Bulls have to go out and get a small forward. I think it's just a question of how can you best man those 3 perimeter positions.
You know, I noticed you didn't mention Lauri Markkanen's name there. Is he a part of the future plans right now, do you think?
At every opportunity, AK's gone out of his way to say that he really values what Lauri brings to the table. He defended him strongly when he had his midseason news conference in early March, talking about the fact that before Lauri was hurt this year with the shoulder injury, you know, his numbers were 19 points a game. He was shooting 50% from the field and 40% from the three-point line. Well, those numbers have dropped substantially since he's come back. He's not shot the ball well in the 10 games since he's returned from that injury. I think that it could go either way, but I think that in order to go after Alonzo Ball or any of the free agent point guards, you would have to renounce the rights to Markkanen. So my guess is that Lauri will probably not be with the Bulls next year, that they'll probably look to move Patrick Williams to the power forward position for his future in the NBA, where he probably is best suited. And then they would look to, as I mentioned, expand their perimeter talent so that they can go with a different look in their starting lineup.
Is that the right move? Is Lauri worth keeping, in your opinion?
Well, it's really hard to say because much like Wendell Carter, he's been hurt so much in his career that it's tough to get a gauge on exactly what his ceiling can be as an NBA player. You remember his second year, he had that month of February where he averaged 26 points and 12 rebounds, and everyone was gushing over his potential and the possibility that he could be an all-star player for the Bulls. I hesitate to close the door on Lauri Markkanen emerging as a very good NBA player. I'm not saying necessarily an all-star, but if he could get to the point where he could stay on the court for 75 games and give you 18 and 10 every night, I think that would be a very positive NBA player. I just don't know how patient the Bulls are going to be, especially with the understanding that they're looking to upgrade at point guard, and they're going to have a very defined choice this summer. You either reinvest in Lauri Markkanen or you explore the possibility of adding Alonzo Ball or some other starting level point guard. It's either or. It's not going to be able both with their cap situation.
And you think the point guard obviously is more important if you had to make a choice?
Not necessarily, but I think that's what Billy Donovan thinks. And you know, Billy and AK have talked about their partnership in constructing this roster. And I think Billy's going to lobby his boss that the best way to go is to bring in a point guard who can really direct this offense, who can be kind of the maestro both in the half court and transition, and that we'll figure out exactly how to rotate our front court. I think they feel like a top-flight point guard can bring out the best in Zach LaVine and maybe ease his burden in trying to have to lead the team in scoring every night as well as handling ball handling responsibilities. And sometimes Zach's also asked to guard the best perimeter player on the other end. So bringing in Lonzo Ball will help ease the strain on Zach LaVine. And right now, Zach LaVine is their best player, and I think he's the guy that you have to keep in mind when you're looking to build a roster. And you also have to figure out how's the best way to maximize the talents of Nikola Vucevic, and having a point guard who can get him the ball in the low post and coming off screen and roll and pick and pop, I think also has a lot of value.
So, Mark, based on what we've talked about today and these new moves, what's your timeline on a Bulls championship? Is it moved up because of the trades?
Well, they made some positive steps in solidifying their front court. As I mentioned, they're going to look at the point guard situation this summer. And they'll also have to make a decision on when to extend Zach LaVine. He'll be a free agent after the 2021-22 season, and he'll be looking for a max contract. So all these parts are kind of moving at the same time, and that's why a general manager has to be looking 3 to 5 years out and what's the best way to maximize his cap flexibility. By bringing in Vucevic, the Bulls reduce that flexibility, and if they decide they're going to use cap space to try to extend Zach LaVine this year, which will be difficult to do because he's probably looking at a max deal, and they can't do that this summer. There's a lot of moving parts right now. In terms of championship contention, well, that's a whole different story. I think right now they want to get beyond being a fringe playoff team to the point where maybe they can compete for home court advantage in the first round, be a 4 seed in the East. Brooklyn's going to be a force for the foreseeable years. Milwaukee re-signed Giannis, so they're going to be in the picture, and Philadelphia with Embiid and Ben Simmons is also going to be strong. So I think those 3 teams have pretty much solidified their spot at the top of the East. Miami made some moves to improve their roster, and reportedly they're going to make a strong move for Bradley Beal with the cap space that they have this summer. He's not a free agent, but they might try to work a trade with their cap space. So there's a lot of teams ahead of them right now in the East. I think that the championship is not even in view right now. I think their goal is to establish themselves as a solid Eastern Conference playoff team and just try to continue to develop and hopefully maybe down the road hit on a big free agent. But with Vucevic and a potential Zach LaVine extension on the books, they're pretty much tied into this roster for the next few years.
Should they extend LaVine, though? Do you think he's worth it?
I do. Yeah, I think he's shown this year that by making his first All-Star team, averaging about 28 points a game, career highs in just about every statistical category, he's made a much better effort on the defensive end. He's one of the top 20 players in the league, and those guys, you don't want to let them get away if you can get them on a team-friendly extension. Now, I don't think Zach is going to take the extension this summer. As I mentioned, I think he's going to go to free agency in 22, and then you're going to have to decide whether or not you want to max him. And I think that given what the moves the Bulls have made with bringing in Vucevic and kind of tying their hands in free agency, I think their big move is going to be to try to keep Zach LaVine on the roster.